Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee in Seoul. Before we get started, let's first get a quick check of the day's highlights. So with this year's Chuseok holiday being 5 days long, a lot of Koreans are choosing to travel abroad. And we take a look at where and what they're spending their money on. What can we expect from the Bank of Japan and the U.S. Federal Reserve when they hold their monetary policy meetings next week? These stories and more coming right up. During this year's 5-day Chuseok holiday, nearly 1 million people are expected to use Korea's main gateway, Incheon International Airport. But what are these tourists going in and out of the country mostly spending their money on? Our Lee Ji-won takes a look.
For many Koreans, this year's Chuseok holiday means a 5-day weekend. Between the 13th and the 18th of this month, nearly 1 million people are expected to use Korea's main gateway, Incheon International Airport. With more Koreans using the opportunity to travel, how do they spend their money when they're abroad?
We're going to Osaka, and our trip is mainly based around eating.
This trip is for my daughter-in-law to get some quality rest. So we'll head to the hot springs and other places that my daughter arranged for us.
Korean tourists used to take mainly package tours built around shopping and tourist attractions. But now, with access to more information online and with more experience traveling, people's spending patterns abroad have changed.
These days, people choose to spend their trips enjoying their hobbies or simply relaxing, things like scuba diving, hitting the spa, or trying new foods.
What about foreign tourists visiting Korea? How do they like to spend their money?
We like Korean food, so we are here mostly for Korean food. We are looking forward to see it.
We came to buy Korean cosmetics, clothes, and we also want to have Korean food.
Last year, nearly 70% of foreign tourists had come to Korea for the shopping. And the steady stream of visitors continue through Chuseok, with cosmetics at the top of their list.
Shopping, especially for cosmetics and perfume, is still Korea's biggest draw for tourists in terms of spending. And this is mainly due to high demand and interest among Chinese tourists, who account for more than 50% of visitors to Korea.
Experts say that with tourists moving from package tours to custom-made itineraries both here and abroad, the industry needs to work on providing a wide range of choices for them at reasonable prices. Lee Ji-won, Business Daily.
A growing number of companies here in Korea are engaging in various community outreach programs to help bring down barriers and help those in need. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us more.
Rows of people with vision or hearing impairments sit in front of a large movie screen. They may not be able to see or hear the movie, but they're still able to enjoy it. To make this possible, Hyundai Motor Club members came together to dub detailed audio descriptions and insert extra captions. Audio descriptions include voiceovers that describe parts of the film with silent actions and visuals to help fill in the gaps. With these additions, more people are able to enjoy movies without being dependent on others.
I never thought my voice was special, but after dubbing for this movie and seeing how it helped break down walls for others, I'm thankful I can use it this way.
Here's a car specially designed and made to assist the disabled. For the past 4 years, Kia Motors has been running a support program giving more than 20,000 disabled people and their families access to these cars now stationed at community welfare centers across Korea. Korea's biggest conglomerate, Samsung Group, has also been supporting and funding nonprofit organizations for welfare projects, while Hyosung has been sending medical volunteer groups to Vietnam since 2011 to provide free services there. These all represent new ideas companies are employing to give back to society and those in need. Hwang Ji-hye, Business Daily.
Have you ever thought how convenient it would be to have your very own personal assistant? A leading Korean telecom company has unveiled a voice-enabled AI system that may look a little rudimentary now, but it has a lot more in store. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
Give it an order.
분위기 있는 노래 들려줘.
And ask it a question.
이 노래 뭐야?
Secret Garden의 Song from a Secret Garden.
It can even control your lights.
플러그 꺼줘.
Dugu, this white cylindrical device, is the brainchild of the nation's largest mobile carrier, SK Telecom. The Intelligent Home Assistant service, which has been in the works since 2012, is the first AI system that understands and processes the various tones, cadences, and dialects of the Korean language. SK Telecom says while Dugu's functions are currently limited to music streaming and controlling home appliances, it plans on adding more advanced services like voice-enabled internet shopping and food delivery, as well as real-time traffic information services down the line. Dugu's emergence is another indication of what looks to be a significant trend in the IT world, the rise of AI systems based on voice interaction. Global IT giants like Amazon and Google have already been developing and commercializing their own AI platforms with the likes of Amazon Echo and Google Home. As an increasing number of tech firms turn to AI in search of a next-generation growth driver, market watchers say the rise of smart assistants may mark the starting point of bringing about fundamental changes to people's daily lives. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
It's Friday, and that means it's time to look through some of the global business stories that made headlines this week. For that, we're now joined by our Eunice Kim in the studio. Hi, Eunice.
Hi, June.
All right, so as we pull ourselves out of the holiday mode next week, markets will be bracing for not just one, but two key central bank meetings. So we have to talk about quantitative easing then.
Right, so next week will be one of those unique cases where the Bank of Japan is set to hold its two-day monetary policy meeting on the same days as the U.S. Federal Reserve on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. Decisions from both central banks could have significant repercussions for financial movements across the world, as was seen in the volatility more than a week ahead of the decisions. Here's more.
Are things about to get jollier? Though Wall Street clawed back to black at the start of the trading week, it wasn't before a pummeling across major stock markets around the world. Investor jitters momentarily subsided after Fed Governor Lael Brainard silenced concerns that the U.S. Central Bank's first rate hike this year could sneak in next week. In her categorically dovish tone, she warned against removing support for the U.S. economy too quickly.
Because the labor market does potentially have still untapped slack, because of the international environment that does have some risks and clearly disinflationary pressures, weak demand, and because of the low neutral rate, all of those things lead me to be somewhat asymmetric in my policy approach.
She basically put the brakes on, I believe, put the brakes on a rate hike in the near term. And I really don't believe there was going to be a rate hike anyway, but the markets got spooked.
But volatility would resume throughout the week as bond yields soared. Investors were watching another central bank across the Pacific. Japan's Governor Haruhiko Kuroda had promised a comprehensive review of its monetary policy during this month's meeting. This comes as the Bank of Japan, now in its 15th year of QE, is estimated to have bought up more than a third of Japanese government bonds. And at the current rapid pace, it's unclear whether the BOJ could continue its program for much longer. As for hints ahead of next week's meeting, Kuroda earlier this month publicly acknowledged the downsides of negative interest rates, including their impact on bank profits and the added pressure they place on businesses from low long-term yields. But it remains to be seen whether that means the BOJ could radically scrap its ambitious bond buying program in the near term, or whether the comprehensive assessment will, in fact, lead to a further cut, deeper into the negative bound.
Well, Kuroda is known for his penchant to surprise, but could a drastic change really be in his toolbox?
Well, so we'll know more by this time next week. But it is true that there has been a drop in confidence in long-term bonds in recent weeks as central bankers in Japan as well as in Europe, the ECB, become more vocal about their concern on the adverse side effects of bond buying and negative interest rates. We're talking about the bottom line for banks and the hit on savers like their pensions. In fact, this week we did see the Japanese bank stocks hit with the worst volatility since the financial crisis, as investors were undecided on how the central bank's next move will affect the country's commercial banks. Meanwhile, the country's Nikkei newspaper reporting this week that the Bank of Japan could in fact dig deeper into negative territory, a move it's to discuss in next week's meeting, according to the Daily.
Now, in the broader scheme of things, there is a sentiment that central banks are at the end of their efficacy.
Right, particularly as these sovereign bonds that they need to purchase to inject money into the markets look to be drying up. That's perhaps why we saw that reaction in the markets when ECB President Mario Draghi said central bankers had not discussed extending its current program past the March 2017 deadline. That's another central bank that looks to be running out of viable bonds to purchase. It's said to have already bought up a third of available German bonds, while it's already exceeded its self-imposed limit on Italian and Spanish bonds. The European Central Bank has injected some $3.7 trillion into the markets and counting. The U.S. Fed, which of course started its QE program years earlier and ended it late 2014, has released $4.45 trillion. And the Japanese central bank is on a similar track at $4.4 trillion and counting.
Well, a lot of numbers there, and also we have a lot to look forward to next week. Thank you so much for coming in today, Eunice.
You bet.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back next week with more, so don't forget to tune in then. Have a great weekend, everyone, and safe travels back home for those of you here in Korea.